Okay, well, maybe some people pop in as we're going along. So not a very big group today. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to, you know, jump on and ask. So thanks for being here for the LPXB. So we'll just run through this quickly. Again, if you have questions, throw them out there. We'll try to get to the bottom of it. So this, I think we're recording this, right? Yes. So this time, we only had 7 labs participating. One of our labs fell off. I think normally we have 8. We've got Omaha, Lincoln, North Platte. Furthest out one is the furthest one out is Scottsbluff. Biochemical tests haven't really changed from the last time either. Um, our big ones like gram stain, catalase, oxidase, indole, and beta lactamase. Everyone's performing those. Motility, surprised to see one lab not performing motility. Full-time employees, most of our labs are on the smaller side, 1 to 10 employees. Nothing really new there. And then training. Um, training or less than 50% of employees are getting trained annually in at least 4 labs. So we will try to find a way to address that. Whether that's our biannual rule out and review, or we were exploring the idea of creating smaller or shorter sessions that can be done on site. Something we've been talking about too. So our first LPX challenge was a simulated cerebrospinal fluid from an unvaccinated 5-year-old child with a new onset of fever and malaise. So we've got a sterile site or sterile sample, unvaccinated 5-year-old child. So like last time, we're going to compare the numbers we got in Nebraska to kind of what the national trends were. I think for the most part, we'll find that they line up pretty well. As you can see in these tables here, we had everyone reporting growth on the chocolate. Um, most labs reporting no growth on blood. A couple of people reported no growth on the MAC, and that's pretty similar to what we saw nationally. Gram stain, same thing. Everyone reported gram negative. Looks like nationally there were just a handful of labs. Looks like maybe 10 that reported gram positive. Um, and then we had a majority vote for coccobacilli. I think it was one lab that reported the bacilli and the cocci. And everyone else just reported coccobacilli. Pretty similar to the national numbers. We had a lot more people calling bacilli than we saw here in Nebraska. Um, and then no growth on the blood, no growth on the McConkey. Biochemical tests. So I just kind of want to mention at the top, um, majority of us said gram-negative coccobacilli. So that's going to kind of, if we were following along in our book, that would kind of guide us to be thinking about 3 organisms: your Francisella, your Brucella, and the Burkholderia mallei. So then using our biochemical tests, we move down those lines. First one, catalase. We had a majority of labs saying catalase positive. So that doesn't really rule anything out since um, all of our BT organisms are at least weak positive. Francisella is going to be a weak positive. Um, so then we'd move on to the next one. I'd probably move on to would be our oxidase, because that is going to differentiate your Francisella from your Brucella. And we kind of had mixed results on this one. We had 2 labs that said it was oxidase positive, 5 saying oxidase negative. So our Francisella is going to be oxidase negative. Hi, Sandra. Thanks for joining. Um, we're just kind of going through LPX, the first, uh, the first, well, number four right now. So if we're taking the majority rule here and we're saying that this is oxidase negative, um, we're still leaning toward Francisella, most likely, and then that would lead us to our beta lactamase, which of course Francisella is beta lactamase positive, and here we had negative. Um, Nationally, we saw more labs reporting oxidase positive for this first challenge. Everything else kind of very similar trends, uh, kind of except for that oxidase. But unanimously in Nebraska, everyone responded non-BT culture. Um, we had just a handful of labs in the country referring to rule out Francisella. So if we go to the results of this LPX, so this was a Haemophilus influenza in pure culture. So the intended response was non-BT culture. So everyone correctly answered that. Haemophilus, as we know, it grows well on chocolate, doesn't grow on blood or McConkey in CO2. So um, Haemophilus influenza is traditionally oxidase positive. So that's why the majority rule oxidase negative kind of threw me off a little. I'm wondering if, if you're doing it on a swab, if you're grabbing it on the swab just straight off the chocolate, sometimes that can leave a little dark spot on your swab and maybe get confused for a, no, I'm gonna have to think through that one. Are there any questions about this LPX? Everyone's pretty comfortable there. I mean, everyone got the correct answer. So we'll move on to the next one. Simulated blood culture from a child with fever and joint pain after returning from a trip to Somalia, where they drank raw camel milk and visited multiple farms. So we have another should be sterile site. What is the I just want to ask real quick, what does the patient history immediately kind of make us think of as far as um, our high consequence organisms that we're dealing with? We got in the chat here. Yep, raw milk. The raw milk is, if you see that in a patient history, it's kind of a tip off that maybe we're thinking about Brucella. Generally found in raw milk and raw cheese products, raw milk products like cheese. So we'll get started here again. Um, Nebraska's responses match pretty closely to the national responses. I mean, they're like mirror images here. We had growth on blood and chocolate, not on McConkey. Some labs set the CNA or the PEA. I saw some growth there. One lab did. And then we had our gram stain reaction. A couple of labs reporting gram positive. Um, Gram positive bacilli, mostly gram negative bacilli, a couple of coccobacilli, and that um, still pretty closely matches our national responses. And then here's another instance where our responses were not completely different, but just a little bit different from the national. We had more labs reporting non-hemolytic than we did nationally, but I mean, McConkey growth, still no growth, so no issues there. Biochemical results are very similar. Um, so again, for our Brucella species, I mean, if we're uh, going off the patient history and we're thinking Brucella, Again, it's catalase positive. It is oxidase positive. The urease would be our big indicator for Brucella, um, because if it's the only one following our algorithm that's urease positive. So we had some labs performing urease and finding it negative, and other labs not performing. Um, so that would have been your rule out for Brucella. If you had followed that algorithm, would have been your urease result. And so for Nebraska results, we did have the one lab who said it was a gram-positive bacillus. So I think that's where they got hung up. So we did have the one lab reporting bacillus anthracis, refer to rule out bacillus anthracis, and everyone else uh, ruling it out as a BT culture, pretty similar to the national averages. So this challenge contained Kingella kingae in pure culture. So the intended response was non-BT culture. And so we kind of had some inconsistent results around the beta hemolysis for this one. Kingella kingae is beta hemolytic, but the ring of hemolysis is often faint, so kind of tough to interpret. Um, and this should have been catalase negative, which would have ruled out all of our BT organisms. Does not grow in McConkey. Any questions about LPX 5? And we'll move on to the last one. And okay, we have a simulated lymph node culture from a 42-year-old visiting relatives in Arizona. So we had growth on all three plates this time, except for one lab reporting no growth on McConkey. Similar to the national, very similar. We had some labs set in the CNA or the PEA. Gram stains, we had a unanimous gram negative. Everyone pretty much agreed it was bacilli. One lab responding bacilli and coccobacilli, same thing nationally. So we're right on track there. Non-hemolytic on the blood. We had my numbers got messed up on that bottom one. We had the one lab reporting no growth on McConkey, and then we had some arguments about whether it was a lactose fermenter or a non-fermenter. We had similar numbers nationally. Biochemically, everyone responded catalase positive. We had negative indole test, negative oxidase, negative urease. Did not perform motility. This should be motility at 35, or it was negative. So we said gram-negative rod. All of our organisms are catalase positive. We're trying to rule out Burkholderia, Pseudomallei, or Yersinia pestis. Our big test for that would be motility. Yersinia pestis is always non-modal. Burkholderia, Pseudomallei will be modal. So we either had negative motility or labs not performing it. And Yersinia pestis, as opposed to other Yersinia species, will be urease negative. So results, we had across the board, most people saying refer to rule out Yersinia pestis, refer for confirmation because they're suspecting Yersinia pestis. So everyone, except for one lab, kind of was leaning toward Yersinia pestis, and the other group was Burkholderia mallei, which would be one of our coccobacilli. Nationally, most people suspecting Yersinia pestis. And this was simulated lymph node, and this challenge did contain Yersinia pestis in pure culture. So they were looking for suspect, refer for confirmation, refer to rule out, refer to rule out. Any questions on challenge 6? Third one? Okay, I think we're recording this so we can make that available. Um, if you would like a copy of the recording, let us know. But that's all I have for you today. Thanks for sitting in. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of me or Becky. Always happy to help. So thanks everyone. That's all I have.